How are you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network, and I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today, on October 29th, here a Tuesday, officially through the entirety of Week 8, and it concluded with a pretty good game last night to maybe a lot of people's surprises between the Steelers and the New York Giants. The Steelers ultimately holding on for the victory, so we're going to go over everything we saw in that game, plus going over some more of the Week 8 games in today's show. The Eagles getting a big win over the Bengals, the Cardinals getting a last-minute victory over the Dolphins, as well as touching on a couple of subjects regarding the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. So make sure to stick around for that. That'll be something to look forward to. But also, before we get started, like I always do, I'd like to remind you guys, if you guys want to be involved with the show in any which way, any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share on anything we say or anything that's on your mind about the NFL, please don't hesitate to do so. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, so we always thrive on your energy and insights to make this show better with your guys' involvement. So now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that, just by using the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat, and that way it guarantees that your message gets read on the air, it's featured on the show, and we can carry the conversation on maybe in a different direction. And it's always a fantastic way to support our channel and our content, so we are always appreciative of you guys for doing that. And go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as exciting and as interactive as possible. So with that now out of the way, we can start talking about some football. Yesterday, between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New York Giants, right? The overall sensations of victory for the Steelers, they go to 6-2. They extend their home Monday Night Football win streak last night on a 22-game win streak there for the Steelers on Monday Night Football at home. As guaranteed as a victory as you'd think, right? With that long of a streak, I think extending back to 1991, if I'm not mistaken. But in yesterday's game, a 26-18 victory over the New York Giants. The Steelers now go into their bye week this upcoming week at 6-2 and in first place solely of the AFC North, while the Giants, on the other hand, fall to 2-6 with a lot of self-deprecating, self-harming events in this game that, they almost reached a point where you thought, hey, like they could get something going, but it was always a penalty, offensive penalty, and things like that just halted any sort of momentum, in my opinion, just from watching the game. The Giants, put up a good fight, and we mentioned in the preview that, this Giants team is oddly enough, pretty good on the road. Daniel Jones, for whatever reason, plays better on the road. He has better numbers on the road, and they've gotten some pretty big wins away from New York, away from MetLife against the Browns or the Seahawks, right? They probably went into those games as underdogs, or at least even. So for the Giants to play well and surprise a lot of people, this game felt like a trap game, if you will, to some Steelers fans or just anybody watching the game. It got kind of tight, and the first half was pretty tight as well. So, the Steelers ended up pulling out. Also now it's the Steelers' third win in a row, and like I said, they're solely in first place of the division because of the loss that Baltimore had to the hands of the Cleveland Browns. So the Ravens fall to 5-3, and the Steelers are a game ahead of them. And also for the Steelers, not only did they have a great night overall, just by winning the game, but also this was Najee Harris, his third straight game with 100-plus rushing yards. This is the first time in his career that he's done that over 3 straight games. So contract year for Najee, playing very well. It's no secret, no surprise that him playing well opens up the offense a little bit more. Same thing with Russell Wilson, right? We can't fail to mention him with his integration into the offense now. This team is looking pretty well run, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where before, with Justin Fields, they went 4-2, but even still, it felt like the offense almost was there. There were some throws you'd like to have back, but I didn't think Justin played bad or anything like that. I'm still a big fan of Justin, but with Russ, you get that experience. It feels like everything's more under control. And that's what the Steelers need right now with this kind of team that they have. They've been looking for quick, immediate success over the last couple of seasons, and now it looks like they have it with Russell Wilson. So that was great to see. Speaking about Najee Harris before, Tyrone Tracy also had a breakout performance last night to kind of help the Giants stay in it a little bit. Tyrone Tracy had 20 carries, 145 rushing yards, and a touchdown. He also added 2 receptions for 5 yards also, but really he did a lot of his damage in the run game, and without him, without his production, really from the entire Giants team, this game probably would have looked a little bit different. So he had a great night. Darius Slayton had a decent night. 4 receptions for 108 yards. Malik Neighbors, 7 receptions for 71 yards. He definitely needed to get more involved. Like we mentioned also, after the game against Philly, where he wasn't really involved in the game too much, it really was a struggle to get him the ball. But he was very involved now, and unfortunately, there were some chances where he came close to scoring. He was out of bounds and things like that. But there are positive signs with this Giants team. It's just, the fact that a lot of the times they kind of just stumble over themselves and get in their own way. Daniel Jones, 264 yards, an interception, and also he lost a fumble late there in the game. So, not awful numbers by the Giants. And on the other side, Russell Wilson, another solid game, 278 yards passing, a touchdown, which should have really been 3 if they counted the first touchdown, but they called it back for a face mask. And also, I don't know how George Pickens doesn't get his second foot down. There was that funny argument about two right feet down in the end zone should equal, both, or should count the same. But yeah, it was just very odd to see how he avoided touching his left foot down to the ground, and then when he did, it was out of bounds. So credit to Deontay Banks for making that hit on him to kind of carry him out of bounds, but still very odd. Russ, another solid game in my opinion. Najee, like I said, 114 yards on 19 carries. George Pickens had another great game, 4 receptions for 74 yards, and Calvin Austin, I've gone this whole time without mentioning him. He had 2 touchdowns on that punt return. The Steelers special teams show up again. He had a 73-yard return on that play there to kind of break the game open, and then later on Russell found him for his only touchdown pass of the game. So overall, this offense is looking good for the Steelers. Looking at how this game kind of played itself out, the first half had only field goals in it and punts. It was 9-9 at halftime, but Pittsburgh had 2 touchdowns that were called back, like I said. So, it was, you weren't losing, I guess, obviously in the game, but if you're the Steelers at halftime, you're thinking you should be up by at least 15 more points. So that was a bit demoralizing, I guess, for the Steelers, a bit disappointing. But, that second half opened up a lot more when, like we said, Calvin Austin broke the game open with that punt return touchdown, made it 16-9. And the Giants, not sitting back, not just accepting defeat at that point because it was a struggle offensively. They responded right away with their own touchdown. They made it 15-23 when they scored because the Steelers tacked on a couple more points after that. And after another field goal each, the score got up to 18-26 at this point, and then there was a golden chance for the Giants, right? This is where the game got a little bit more exciting. Probably the most excitement that we saw out of the game last night was when Russell tried to run for a first down. The Giants forced the fumble, and they recovered it, and they were right there, right in the red zone or just outside the red zone. And, you're kind of thinking, like, for Russ to make a turnover, for Russ to make a mistake, obviously unintentional, but still, the Giants now have a chance, only being down 8 points. This was a great chance for them, but they squandered that opportunity, or really I should say, TJ Watt, just being the monster that he is, has a one-on-one matchup for whatever reason you couldn't explain or give a valid reason why TJ would ever be one-on-one. He beats Illuminor, the right tackle, Jones, and right away he gets the ball back. So, the Giants squandered that opportunity on a great play by TJ, but even still, they forced the Steelers to punt the ball, and they had a chance there towards the end. They were making some pretty big gains on the passing game as well in their last drive, but ultimately, again, it was a bad throw by Daniel Jones, sailed over the head of Devin Singletary, and Beanie Bishop, the undrafted rookie cornerback for the Steelers, gets another interception, just closing out the game at that point. So, yeah, great game for the Steelers. Defensively there to shut the door. But really, like I said, the Giants, the penalties were just ridiculous because the amount of times the Giants got flagged was 11 times compared to the Steelers' 5. And the turnovers were huge, but, the Giants gave it away by providing the Steelers with a fumble recovery that they got and an interception as well. The Giants, created a turnover, and that was their gateway to trying to tie this game up. But, they ended up losing the turnover battle in back-to-back drives by giving the ball away. So, it's just the little things that you'd like to see the Giants fix because they have good players. Dexter Lawrence was creating havoc. Brian Burns was a great acquisition. Tyrone Tracy, looks like he's going to be something special for them. Malik Neighbors, obviously it goes without saying. So they have good players, but they've just, kind of gone in their own way. They're still trying to grow through these things. So next season, it looks like at this point, it's going to be a little better. But lastly here for the Steelers, it's a good record. It's what you'd want if, the quote-unquote easier part of the schedule is already done, in this first half of the year. Now, after your bye week, the real games start. You're going to take the wins whichever way you can get them. And honestly, if it wasn't for those 2 losses to the Colts and the Cowboys, which arguably the Steelers should have won, you could make a case that they could be undefeated. Again, with that caveat that, who have they played? And that's fair because they haven't really played too many great teams. That's for the second half of the year. So the Steelers are looking good. They're feeling good. Their offensive line's playing better. Najee's having a great year. Russell Wilson looks like he has been always the answer. He's just been hurt. And the defense is allowing less than 20 points per game. Everything is sunshine and roses right now for the Steelers, right? But we're going to find out really what they're made of come Week 10 when they face the Commanders on the road, when they have to go through that gauntlet of divisional games and play the Chiefs and play the Eagles as well. There's going to be some great games if the Steelers are a true contender. So they have the opportunity to do it. They have it out in front of them, and they have a good cushion here as well, going up to 6-2, being in first place in the division. It's hard to imagine a better scenario that you're walking into this gauntlet of games, right? It could be a lot worse. You could be in third place. You could be 500 right now, and these games become so much more important. But it was good for them to kind of figure out what kind of team they are a little bit here through the first half, find out that Russ maybe is the guy going forward, at least for this season. And, defensively, you kind of got more of an identity of who you are. So the next half of the year is going to be great for the Steelers. But for right now, I think they're in a great spot, as good as they would have imagined in this first half. So hard to get mad over that. They got a good win yesterday, and now we won't see them for about a week, over 2 weeks now, with their bye week coming up. But in talks now about the rest of Week 8, there were some games that I wanted to get to, specifically the Eagles and the Cincinnati Bengals, because I think we've reached a point where the Eagles can start to excite us a little bit more because of what they've shown on the field. We're going to go over what we saw in that Bengals game and why it was so lopsided and just the positives overall for the Philadelphia Eagles. So we'll be right back. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk a little bit more about the games that we didn't get to in yesterday's show regarding Week 8, and one of them that I had to bring up was the Eagles winning their third game in a row and going to 5-2. In their second consecutive road game, the Eagles also got a win. Now they go to 5-2 after a 37-17 win over the Cincinnati Bengals, who unfortunately for them, their lackluster season would be the best way I could put it, continues, just because the expectations for this Bengals team, and it always feels like they're close. They are what the record says they are, in the sense that not necessarily that they're the same level of every 3-5 team, but the Bengals, in the case of being 3-5 and reflecting who they are as a team, it's right there. You feel like it's close, right? 3-5 by no means is completely done, but you always feel like you're getting close. You get close to 500, right, in this game where you were 3-4 going in, and then you find yourself at a loss. There's always something that pops up that disappoints you, that doesn't come through, and that's where you are with the Bengals, right? You feel like it's almost there, you have all the pieces, but then there's something else. And then the next week you look great, you get another win, you're back to being close to finally maybe seeing a breakthrough, and unfortunately, this other thing, fails you or something like that. So that's what I'm feeling right now with the Bengals. It feels like it's hard to understand how they have the pieces and everything, but just certain things go wrong. Maybe they start off the game very well, like they did in this one, but then it just dies off, and you don't really know exactly what to pinpoint it on, right? People have mentioned the defense. People have mentioned maybe the running game after the loss of Joe Mixon, the offensive line not being great to begin with, but losing one of their offensive tackles for the rest of the year is another thing. So there are certain things, but you still feel like the Bengals should be putting up more of a fight than this. But really, the Eagles also, I think, for as many reasons as we can think of for the Bengals, the Eagles also now have been impressing a little bit more, at least have been impressing me. Philadelphia now are on a 3-game win streak with this victory. They're still about a half a game back of Washington for first place in the NFC East. So with those games coming up, I'm sure they play the Commanders soon in one of these games. If I just check real quick, they play the Commanders not this week or the following week, but after that on November 14th. That'll be their first game against them. So they got to keep this pace, trying to keep up with the Commanders that have obviously been the story of the entire season. Jaden Daniels has taken over everything, but the Eagles, don't forget about them. They're still right there, and I think this game is inching me closer to believing that this team is sort of getting there, and I truly believe that because in this game, it took a half before really Philadelphia kind of kicked it into gear, whereas with Cincinnati in this game, they began very well, but then they also just kind of flattened out and couldn't score anymore after a certain time. So with this game, like we've been talking about, it was a good performance, again, I have to mention, by Jalen Hurts, because in this game, he had 236 yards, only one throwing touchdown, but accounted for 3 rushing touchdowns. So 4 touchdowns on the day for Jalen Hurts, and now if you look at his last run of games, this 3-game win streak, he played very well against the Browns. He had 264 passing yards, 2 touchdowns in that one, and no rushing numbers really. Against the Giants, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, and he had 114 passing yards and another throwing touchdown. And in this game in Cincinnati, 4 touchdown game for Hurts. So, yeah, you might be looking at the teams, right, and thinking, oh, like, big deal, it's the Giants, or it's the Browns, or maybe even the Bengals aren't that good. But I think it's something. I think it's significant for Jalen Hurts to build this run of games, because before, when there was that whole negative cloud around the Eagles, especially after they lost to the Buccaneers, then they went into their bye week, and they were just trying to figure everything out. So coming off of that bye week and having a good game against the Browns, albeit still a very close game, then they blow out the Giants, and then they pretty much blow out the Bengals there in the last parts of the game. So it is something to start building here, I think, for the Eagles, that can excite some fans, I'm sure, because their team is, stacking wins now. They're not just getting a win here, bad performance here. I think this is a good sign for the Eagles, whereas with the Bengals, not awful numbers. Joe Burrow, 234 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. The running game, I guess you would say, disappointed in this game. They only had 58 total rushing yards. Chase Brown led all running backs with 32 yards and that touchdown. Mike Gesicki, 7 receptions, 73 yards for National Tight End Day. And Jamar Chase got on the score sheet by scoring the only touchdown for or one of the touchdowns for the Bengals. He had 54 yards, 9 receptions, so not a crazy game, but not too bad either as well. But yeah, looking how this game played out and kind of how odd it was a little bit, just because you look at the way that the game started with Cincinnati scoring on their first drive, 17-play, 70-yard drive for the Bengals. You know, it's hard to, in Philadelphia also, or actually, no, excuse me, in Cincinnati, it's hard to start any better than that, right? A dominating drive to kick off the game at home. It definitely got the juices flowing there in Cincinnati, and, you know, by the reaction of everything, it felt like, you know, the Bengals could take this game. I don't know if they were the favorites or underdogs heading into this game, but still a major game for both of these two teams. Then, after a couple field goals followed that, the score was 10-3 in favor of Cincinnati, but Cincinnati, right after that, they missed their next field goal, and of course, like it usually does happen, you miss an opportunity and the team scores right after that, and that's exactly what the Eagles did. They scored a touchdown right after that missed field goal to tie it at 10-10 going into halftime. So now the game gets a little bit shorter now, right? You finish the half deadlocked, so now with all the changes, with all the adjustments that both coaches have made, you start a new game per se, and it looked like the Eagles came out a lot more energized, a lot more disciplined in their execution, because after halftime, obviously, we had 3 straight touchdown drives, 2 by Philadelphia and 1 by Cincinnati. So now the score, when it was 10-10 at halftime, the Eagles jumped out to a lead, actually, 24-17, but still, by no means was the game done, obviously, but the game really changed and really got away from the Bengals, I believe, was when they didn't convert on that 4th down to end the third quarter. And that felt like a big momentum shift. It felt like a demoralizing play where it was a moment where, you know, the Bengals, you know, they just gave up 3, or they gave up just 2 touchdowns to the Eagles, and where they only had 1, and then they punted away another drive that they have. But at that point, you're trying to keep pace, and you don't convert on a play that, right from the start, it looked like Cooper DeJean, the second-round rookie for the Eagles, read it pretty well, so credit to him. But also, it just never looked like it was going to develop into something. You know, you want to get Jamar the ball, obviously, in those big moments, but it was pretty evident that the Eagles knew what was coming. They knew it was going to Jamar, and Cooper DeJean made a great play, and they stopped him. They stopped him on that drive, and then right after that, Philadelphia goes on to get 2 more field goals and a touchdown. The touchdown drive was a 12-play, 85-yard drive, and after those 2 field goals as well, it just ballooned to 17-37, obviously, the final score. And I didn't mention also that touchdown that the Eagles scored killed about 8 minutes off of the game clock in the 4th quarter. So you have the Bengals missing an opportunity to potentially tie the game or to continue their drive to try and tie the game, right? But you don't get it, you fail that conversion, and the Eagles kill the rest of the time, and on top of that, they score a touchdown and those 2 other field goals as well. So it wasn't until after, you know, that 4th down conversion, you know, it became 37-17, right? But from that point on, you know, the Bengals offense really died off from there. After the turnover on downs, the Bengals threw an interception, a pretty miraculous one, right? It's not like just like Joe threw a bad ball or anything like that. It was just a good play by the Eagles secondary, and they also lost a fumble. Mike Gesicki lost a fumble. So the game was pretty much wrapped up at that point, and this win is obviously more impressive, I believe, for the Philadelphia Eagles, because Cincinnati has a good offense with a great quarterback and great wide receivers. So I think for the Eagles defense to finally face an offense like that, you know, we just talked about the Browns. They really struggled with Deshaun. You had the Giants also really struggling. You know, they only scored 3 points. This was a good, you know, level up kind of test for the Eagles defense to face Jamar Chase, to face Joe Burrow, and just the Cincinnati offense that has been putting up points. But, on this day, the Eagles defense stepped up and they played very good coverage there towards the end, forcing these turnovers and just forcing tighter throws that, with obviously the Bengals chasing the game and everything like that, were resulting in turnovers or just were resulting in becoming easier for the Philadelphia Eagles defense to kind of read it. So, their defense, the Eagles defense, generated a good amount of pressure, some big turnovers, obviously to complement their offense, dominating and demoralizing also with those long drives. So I think Philly is entering into their best form so far, and that's one of the best things you can have for a football team to kind of start rolling into your groove now in week 10, week 9, week 11. Once you start rolling into that groove and feeling good, you have the big divisional games coming up. You have the end of the season, right, where everybody's jockeying for standings, for seedings, right? If you're just entering your best form there, that's exactly what this Eagles team needs, as opposed to last year, obviously, right, where they hit their worst part of the season around this time of year. So to kind of have it flip or look like it's flipping a little bit from last year, that's a great sign. Obviously, Saquon is doing his thing. I think Jalen is playing cleaner football now, being a bit more responsible with the ball. And their defense is getting people off the field. Jalen Carter's making an impact. Those edge rushers now are starting to, turn the corner figuratively and literally, helping this defense. And they're making plays on the back end as well. So it's encouraging, certainly. Can they win this division? It's right there. It's not like the Commanders are 2 or 3 games ahead. They're right there basically with the same record. So, the Eagles, if things start going or continue to go like I'm sort of predicting, why couldn't they win the division, right? The Commanders are young. There's their first season kind of figuring everything out. The Eagles have been here. They've won the division before, and they have all the talent in the world to do so. So I think this is a good sign here for Eagles fans to kind of start getting excited about this because they have a good team. The issue has always been the coaching or the distractions or the relationships off of the field. And it looks like they've kind of put all those things to bed. And now they're just left with a very good and talented team. So they're only going to continue to get better, which is also another great sign. So it starts with the win that they had and in a pretty good game for them as well. So that was the Eagles. So from one bird team, we're going to go to another bird team in the Arizona Cardinals, getting their own big win over the Miami Dolphins in Miami, spoiling Tua's return. We're going to go into that. A very close game. One that maybe not a lot of people tuned into, but they missed certainly a great game by the Cardinals and just overall, just for entertainment purposes. So we're going to talk about that and discuss how good this Arizona team really is, and also are the Miami Dolphins done officially for 2024. So we'll be right back with those two questions after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping back into the action now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, looking over some of these games here. One of the most underrated games from the weekend was this 28-27 comeback victory by the Arizona Cardinals over the Miami Dolphins. A game that many perhaps didn't have on their television just because, you're thinking the Cardinals or the Dolphins, maybe not so exciting. But this game was really a nail-biter that Arizona won in the end, 28-27, with a last-second field goal on the road, mind you, to go to 4-4 on the year, while the Miami Dolphins, unfortunately, with all the excitement, the just hype, the energy around Tua's return, unfortunately, that got spoiled, and they dropped to 2-5 now on the season. And Arizona, funny enough, with this win, and the win last week as well, they've won, finally, back-to-back games, in a season for the first time since September 26th in 2021. A pretty ridiculous thing to think about, right? To not win back-to-back games for almost like 4 years is, it doesn't seem like too far, but it's pretty remarkable that they haven't been able to do that. So for them to do that now, I think that's a good sign for them going forward. And like I mentioned, this was Tua's return after clearing concussion protocol during last week's practices. He was able to play. He was very adamant during the week also when we talked about how he was very convinced that he wanted to come back. He was very convinced that, he wasn't going to retire. The love for this game, very admirable by Tua to, to kind of see what this game means to him. So for him to come back, it was great to see him out there. He had a run also that got everybody off of their feet. So that was awesome to see by Tua. But unfortunately, he would have loved the win. But that wasn't the case. It led to Miami. This game was Miami's highest scoring game of the entire year. But, like we keep saying, it was spoiled there by the Arizona Cardinals. And with the Cardinals, and on that question that I brought up, in the sort of teaser to this segment, the Cardinals, believe it or not, are the 4th seed in the playoffs right now. And obviously, with them being in the top 4, they're leading the NFC West at 4-4 right now. They're in first place in their division. For everybody that might not know that might not even believe that, because it is the Cardinals, right? The same old Cardinals, just they're okay, I guess, for a lot of people's minds, a lot of people's opinion about them. But they're hanging in there. They're in first place right now. Like I said, at 4-4. But San Francisco, Seattle, they're also 4-4. But the Cardinals have those legs above them. And the Rams, who I predicted would win this division, are in 3-4. They're technically last, but I feel like they, like the Eagles, like we just talked about, are finding their groove at the right point of the season. So I'm picking them to win the division, but I don't think it should lessen what the Arizona Cardinals have been able to do up until now, because they're 4-4, and that might not be exciting. It might not make front page in the newspaper or anything like that, but for this Cardinals team and how, they're viewed, and with Marvin Harrison coming in, maybe not a lot of people knowing who Trey McBride is, one of the young up-and-coming tight ends, James Conner, bringing them a lot of balance in their running game. I'm pumping the brakes a little bit on the Cardinals. I'm trying not to get overly hyped, like this team is going to win the Super Bowl next year. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that the Cardinals, for what they have been in recent seasons, they haven't won back-to-back games since 2021. They're not going to be that bad. They're going to be good sooner rather than later, in my opinion, because I think Kyler isn't given the credit that he deserves for being a very good thrower of the football with that baseball background. I think that helps a lot, and I think he's been playing very well. He was a big contributor to this win, as I will mention. But they have a running game with James Conner. He's been one of the more underrated guys over the last few years. Trey McBride. You see the difference that these tight ends make nowadays with Brock Bowers just in his first year. Obviously, the Kelseys, the Kittles of the world. Kittle is having a phenomenal season. And Mark Andrews in Baltimore, he's starting to pick it up also. To kind of have a guy like that in Trey McBride, I think doesn't get spoken about enough. And finally, they got their guy, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., the number one guy, their number one target, the number one receiver, right? They just need to fill in the other gaps because they have everything else, in my opinion, and obviously the defense, right? I think they need a solid piece there to add on to, Budda Baker and guys like that. So they're not just like the same old Cardinals. They're just going to be stuck in neutral, in just the same old all-right team. They're going to be good. They're going to be good sooner rather than later. I like what Jonathan Gannon's doing, and I think it just showed in this game, right? Kind of proving to people that they're not just going to roll over, because they definitely could have in this game, but they kept fighting. They kept, trying to come back in this game, and they were successful in doing so. And the Cardinals in this game, talking about Kyler Murray, he had 307 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he added 19 rushing yards, a QB rating of 116, very good for any quarterback. And passing wise, for those 300 yards, Trey McBride had 9 receptions on National Tight End Day for 124 yards. Marvin Harrison, 6 receptions, 111 yards, and a touchdown. And also, Michael Wilson added another touchdown as well. And James Conner, maybe not the most gaudy numbers, but he had 20 carries, 53 yards, and a touchdown. Solid games offensively for them. And they made big stops when they needed to. And also, on the other side, the Dolphins didn't play a bad game. This was their highest scoring game of the entire year. And they had 234 yards, a touchdown. Devon Achane, 97 yards, 10 carries. Raheem Mostert was the one that found the end zone rushing with 2 of them, but Devon Achane got in the end zone with a pass. And Tyreek Hill finally back on the map with 6 receptions for 72 yards. Not a bad game, but just the Cardinals, I feel like, stepped up to this game and just executed better down the line. And also, with this game and how it all sort of broke down here, just quickly, the Dolphins had it going to start this game off. They were off to a 10-0 lead, and Arizona made it close at one point, 10-7, after that touchdown to Michael Wilson. But Miami added a field goal. They added a field goal, and it also added that field goal to make it 13-7 into halftime. Then Miami, not only did they take the lead into halftime by basically almost a touchdown, they also extended the lead even more and made it 20-10 after the Cardinals got another field goal. And, it was starting to, it felt like pull away from the Cardinals at that point, but Arizona got it going after it's just a bad play by the Dolphins. It was a high snap that went over to his head. He tried to push it out of bounds, and he almost completely whiffed and failed on it. But luckily for him, it did roll out of the back of the end zone, and the Cardinals got that spark, right? They got the safety. They got the ball back after they punted it to them. And, the Cardinals took that punt, and they went down and scored off of that, but failed on the 2-point conversion. So, at that point, the Arizona Cardinals were trailing 20-18. So, it is right there for a game that, you're feeling is starting to pull away from you. Then, boom, you get a mishandled snap, safety. You score off of that, and then you're right back in it in a new ball game. So, still, though, Miami, I'm sure we're feeling like, we're still in control of this game. We just had a bad play, and they took advantage of it. Let's go out there and respond. And that's exactly what they did. They went down and scored a touchdown. Raheem Mostert got his second of the day with 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They're down, or now they're up by 9 points at this point, the Miami Dolphins, with, like I said, 12 minutes left. So basically a good amount of the quarter left, but 9 points for Miami to be at home and give that up in the fourth quarter was looking a little bit tough. But, of course, Arizona scored with 8 minutes left still in the fourth quarter, so they scored very quickly, only taking up about 4 minutes. And now the score is 27-25. And even then, you're thinking Miami must have something here to respond with. But Arizona's defense, for the one time in this game that they needed them to, they forced the Dolphins to punt away the ball. And from that point on, it's not like there was like a minute left. Arizona, for what turned out to be the last drive of the game, put together a 13-play, 73-yard drive that killed the last 5 minutes of this game. So, for an offense for a game where the Cardinals were battling back, they had their best drive. They had their best 2 series of the game where their defense came up with a big stop, got the ball back quickly, and their offense just flawless drive to kill off the last 5 minutes, and they ended up scoring that last-second field goal, right, to take the 3 points and win by 1 point, 28-27. So, with that now being the case, as much as it was for Arizona a massive win for them, I think this was a pretty big loss for the Dolphins as well. I didn't really see too much from this team going forward. And I mentioned that if they lost this game, they were one of my picks to kind of, wrap up the season, or at least really consider it, because they're sitting at 2-5 right now. And, you might feel from after seeing this game that this offense, you believe in this offense again with Tua coming back. Tyreek looked great, Jalen Waddle obviously, and Devon A-Chain, but you're still 2-5 in an AFC conference that's very tight. That is going to be very tight over the last couple of weeks. And you look at this Dolphins schedule, you look at the Bills game, that's their next game up. They're probably going to lose. Then they play the Rams, who are playing just as good as anybody, I believe. They're probably going to lose that game too, so they're going to be 2-7 at that point. And for you to be in 2-7, you have the last 7 to 8 games left. You'd have to win a good amount of those games and be maybe 9-8 or 10-7 or something like that. And I just don't see that happening for this Dolphins team. While they have shown some good signs, it's hard for me to believe that they're just going to turn it on quickly and roll out a great stretch of games. I don't really see it. So this game, while it was exciting for Arizona, I've said that they're showing good signs here to kind of emphasize the fact that they're going to be pretty good in the next couple years, or maybe 1 year. But this loss for the Dolphins definitely hurts, and I feel like it's not going to be enough. I think it's going to be too little too late for them now going forward. And looking at it, even still with the playoffs and everything like that here, it's the last thing I'll mention. Maybe you're thinking 7th seed, but you look at the Chargers, they have that spot right now, and I don't see them, kind of falling off the face of the earth. And then you look at the number 8 spot, maybe to give you some hope. That's where the Colts sit, and I don't think they're just going to fall off either. They just announced today that Joe Flacco is going to be back in there as their starter, so I don't think that's just going to make them lose the next 5 games. So it's hard for the Dolphins to kind of squeeze in there now. They're going to need a lot of help, and I don't see it coming this year. So, they might have to ponder over their long-term view on this season and going forward. But great win by the Cardinals. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And maybe if they make the playoffs, that's going to be a huge win for the Cardinals, right? They're not going to win the division. I've already said that's going to be the Rams. But, the Cardinals, if they fight for a playoff spot and somehow get one, that alone is going to be a massive win for this team and give them great confidence going forward with this project for Jonathan Gannon. So, great win for the Cardinals. But now, speaking about great wins, we're going to move on and talk about the Houston Texans, a divisional game against the Indianapolis Colts, who we just mentioned. The Texans sweep the Colts. They go to 6-2, but with a lot of major losses for the Colts, and also some things to talk about here for the Indianapolis Colts as well. So we'll be right back after a short break with the Colts and Texans game.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back now on the show to continue looking over some of the games from this past week in Week 8 and talking about some of the events that occurred in some of these pretty massive games. Because looking at this game now, the Texans and the Indianapolis Colts, Houston and Indy met for the second time on Sunday. And again, same result as the first time. Houston won in the same way by narrow margins. This time Houston won 23-20. To stay on top of the AFC South, and now they go to 6-2, sole possession of the division, while the Indianapolis Colts drop to 4-4. Looking at both of these games and how close the Colts played the Texans, who everybody, including myself, are very high on, and they have all the talent. They are looked upon as the favorite to not only win this division, but be one of the major contenders. The Colts have played them very well, so to kind of harp on my point before, relating it to the Dolphins. The Colts, they're not a bad team. They're 4-4. I think the record's a little bit unfair. I'm sure they'd love the Jaguars game back, but they are what they are right now. But they're by far not a bad team. So because of that, you look at these two contests over week 1 and now just this past week between the Texans and the Colts. They both games have been decided by a total of 5 points. It was 29-27 in week 1 in Indy, and this time the game was only decided by 3 points. So they've been right there. They've been playing the Colts. They've been playing up to the Texans, their competition. So it is good to see by the Colts, but still, looking at this game a little bit more, Joe Mixon was a big factor in this one once again, because you look at his week 1 performance against the Colts, and in week 1, he had 30 carries for 159 yard impact. He had 25 carries, 102 yards, and a touchdown. He's the first player in NFL history to have at least 100 yards rushing and a touchdown rushing as well in 4 of his first 5 games with a new team. So, I think it's fair to say that the acquisition of Joe Mixon has been one of, if not the most important, certainly for the Texans, but one of the most impactful ones for just the entire NFL, for all the transactions and additions we've seen. He's been everything that the Texans would have wanted and more. So great for the Texans to have him, because like we said on the teaser a little bit, how the Colts now they're dealing with some losses, because it was announced today that Stephon Diggs officially has torn his ACL, and in a moment where the Texans are not trying to get by because they have good players, but they're without Nico Collins, they were without Joe Mixon for a while, so you were looking to get back to the point where everybody was back together again. We could see this Texans offense for what it really was, and now you get this news on Tuesday to really put a damper in everything, because obviously Stephon's not coming back this year, and Nico should be out at least 1 more week, if not 2, before he's back. So the Texans have now, from what was this high-powered, fully stacked up offense, now they're without Stephon, and Nico and Tank were, I'm assuming, the original plan, right, after their rookie years, to come in and have a bigger role. Obviously, with Stephon Diggs coming in, you have to involve him. So Tank Dell hasn't really been as involved as I would have liked or expected, but maybe now this is an opportunity for him. He scored in this game as well, and this could be yet another opening for him to kind of step into this limelight and take that jump like Nico Collins did just last year. I'm still waiting for that jump from Tank Dell, so hopefully he could take advantage of this opportunity now to get more targets, but certainly a bad piece of news for the Texans, for Stephon Diggs too, which he seemed uber motivated this year to kind of go out there and prove a point on a new team, and kind of be on a really good contending team also, right? But unfortunately, he tears his ACL, so he will not be back for the Texans. And also, how that affects free agency a little bit, because he isn't guaranteed to stay there. So how that all plans out will be something, to talk about later on. But on this game and looking at the performances, CJ Stroud had a bounce-back game from last week where he only threw for like 86 yards. This time, he threw for 285, a touchdown, and had a quarterback rating of 99. Joe Mixon, I already read out his stats. He had an exceptional game. Stephon Diggs led all receivers with 5 receptions and 81 yards. Tank Dell had the touchdown in the game, 4 receptions for 35 yards as well. Whereas the Colts, for as tight as the game was, they had some pretty good showings. Jonathan Taylor, coming back off an injury, he had an amazing game, 20 carries, 105 yards, and a touchdown. Josh Downs had a good game, 4 receptions, 109 yards, and a touchdown for him as well. So the Colts, both defenses too, playing a big part in the results overall. So from the statistical standpoint, there wasn't anything that really stood out that you're thinking, oh, like this was the reason that they lost. But looking at the moments in this game and the scenarios and just what happened in this game overall, looking at it in the first half, there was a very tight contested game between both of them, just responding to one another. That seemed to be the theme of the first half because the one team scored a field goal, the other team answered. It was 3-3. Then Indianapolis scored a touchdown to Josh Downs. It was 10-3, but Houston again answered and made it 10-10 with a touchdown from Joe Mixon. And after that, to kind of follow off on this mirroring pattern, there were 6 straight punts combined by both of these teams after the score was 10-10. And one of the biggest plays, in my opinion, that occurred after, we got this period where both teams are struggling, both offenses can't get anything going. We see 6 straight punts by both of these teams. The biggest play came to me right before halftime when Anthony Richardson faced a third down and 3 or 4, if I'm not mistaken. And there was around like 20 to 25 seconds left at this point, if I'm not mistaken. And on 3rd and 3, he was backed up pretty much into his own red zone, right? He was nowhere near a safe spot for him to throw a pass, but that was the play that was called. He, I'm sure, makes a bad read on where he wants to go with the football, and instead of hitting Michael Pittman, or actually Josh Downs, I believe, on a short little, choice route over to the right side, he throws it directly to Jalen Petrie, the Texans safety, who was just standing right there, and they return it a couple yards. And now, immediately, right before halftime, the Texans are in fantastic position to score a touchdown or at least get some points back, and that's exactly what they do, because off of that turnover, with 17 seconds left, Houston gets a touchdown to go up 17-7, a touchdown scored by Tank Dell, and in a spot where the Colts were going to go into halftime pretty much tied, no one was feeling great, they make such a big error, not only to highlight Anthony Richardson, but, to just really put your team in a questionable, in a precarious spot, because nothing's going to be lost going into halftime 10-10, right? You're just going to regroup, reanalyze everything, it's even. But by making that mistake on a 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, to throw the ball in that scenario, I feel like there's more risk than reward in that scenario. So I don't know, if Shane Steichen called the play, or if it was just, Anthony Richardson just throwing it anyway, knowing that it was a bad read. Regardless of the fact, it made a big impact, because now you go into halftime losing by 7 points instead of being even. And in the second half, it got a little bit more interesting. Indianapolis made it real close again with a touchdown from Jonathan Taylor. And the score at that point, after that touchdown, was 20-23. And still, the Colts were losing. They had a great chance when they recovered that fumble in the Texans drive, where they were already in the Colts red zone. They fumbled the ball away. They recovered it. The Colts defense recovered it, and they had a chance there, not only to take away points from the Texans, but to get some back, but they didn't do anything with it. But even still, the Colts had a chance in this game to only need a field goal, because they forced the Texans to punt again. So Indianapolis was going to have the ball last. They only needed a field goal, and there were still 54 seconds left. But ultimately, nothing really came about this drive, and they even couldn't get the Hail Mary off, because I believe it was Danielle Hunter who came in and sacked Anthony Richardson again, or it was somebody getting to him before he can unload the Hail Mary ball. So yeah, the Colts lose a pretty big game here, 23-20, and Anthony Richardson's struggles do kind of shine a little bit here, because at one point in the first half, I think he was like 2 for 15 or something like that, which, we're not going to get into the whole Anthony Richardson situation on whether or not, he's looking like a bust or anything like that. I think it's still way too early. He's only played still like a handful of games in his rookie year, which he missed most of, and even into this year as well. The Colts drafted him for his high upside, his potential, right? So, it's logical to think that you need to play him for him to get this experience, get better, and learn off of things like that. But also, with the news that just broke today about Joe Flacco now starting, I believe that could be something that does benefit Anthony Richardson because he hasn't really been playing lights out this season, and there has been some frustrations, especially with Joe Flacco, just sitting there, and the struggles that he showed in the first half. I don't hate this move, and, it kind of goes off of the fact that we saw something very peculiar happen for the Indianapolis Colts and for Anthony Richardson specifically in the third quarter of this game that I think aided a little bit in making this decision for the Colts. And that actually leads me into the last segment of today's show, that peculiar moment that we saw by Anthony Richardson in that third quarter where he essentially tapped himself out of the game for whatever reason. If you guys weren't aware of it, we're going to touch on it. I'll give you my thoughts on it, and also we're going to determine if it's something that is significant enough to kind of make this a story out of, or whether or not people are just overblowing this situation. So we're going to answer that question. What did Anthony Richardson do that has everybody talking? We're going to answer that question when we return in just a few seconds. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. The last segment of the Chip Shot Football Podcast has to do with the fact that we had a moment happen over the weekend. Not anything related to games or anything related to the outcomes of games or reviewing anything like that. But the moment came in the game that we just talked about between the Texans and the Indianapolis Colts that, Houston ended up winning and everything, right? We just talked about it. But people are really taking notice and really taking some serious feelings to what happened in the third quarter when Indianapolis faced a 3rd and goal, and their starting quarterback, Anthony Richardson, after he ran essentially back to the line of scrimmage, he ran around for a while. He kind of bought himself some time, but ultimately ended up going back to where he started. He kind of went to a knee. He signaled over to his own sideline and kind of, gave his helmet like one of these, signaling. I'm assuming, I haven't played football, but from what everyone's saying, it's a signal to kind of let them know that he needs to come out of the game, essentially, right? He needs to take a play, usually, signifying that there's an injury or he has something that's not feeling right to be taken out of the game, right? To tap his helmet like that. But live, looking at it live, it would appear that maybe he was hurt or something like that. Maybe he felt something in his hamstring or something like that. You don't know. But instead, after the game, because it was such a big moment in the game, 3rd and goal for the starting quarterback not to be out there, they had to ask Anthony Richardson about it, right? Obviously, logically, and he gave the honest answer, right? Tired, ain't gonna lie. That was a lot of running right there that I did, and I didn't think I was gonna be able to go that next play, so I just told the coach I need a break right there. As honest as anybody could have been, Anthony Richardson said he came out of the game because he was tired. nothing I've ever really seen before. Nothing that I'm sure any NFL player or any athlete would ever admit to, right? To just say that they came out of the game because they needed one, right? I'm sure maybe it's happened for receivers, linebackers, always, right? Pass rushing, giving their 100%. They need a break here or there. But for the quarterback to say that he's tired and say that he needs a break on a 3rd and goal where you're playing in such a big game means a lot for the division, means a lot, I'm sure, for everybody just being motivated to beat the Texans. For your leader, your starting quarterback, right, to not be out there, it looks bad, basically, is what we're getting at, right? It looks bad, and it just looks careless, like almost like Anthony Richardson is saying, like this moment, what he's doing, maybe his importance or how he views it isn't as important, right? It feels like he's almost like too, I don't want to say like he's too good for this moment or he's too good for the Colts to just be like, I need a break. But it had a hint of like arrogance a little bit, or just the level of being so, I guess, ignorant or naive, I guess, for a lack of a better terms, to on a 3rd and goal just be like coach, like I need one. And like it's so peculiar because I've never really seen a quarterback ever do it. And afterwards, head coach Shane Steichen was asked about it yesterday, and he said, "We had a conversation about it this morning in the quarterback room, which I'll keep private, but obviously in those situations, he knows on those types of deals, you can't take yourself out, and it's a learned experience for him, and he's got to grow from it." So, he said that, pretty typical for coach talk, right? But also he was asked if Anthony Richardson is his starting quarterback, and he said, right now, yesterday morning, today he is. Yes, that's what he said. Then someone else, went off of that point and asked him, would Anthony Richardson start against Minnesota on Sunday Night Football? And he said, Shane Steichen, he said, we're evaluating. Enough said there, right? Especially with what we heard today, right? Joe Flacco going to be the starting quarterback now for the Colts. Shane Steichen wasn't bluffing, and now we get into a situation with this moment, and also with Anthony Richardson, because I think also it also has to do with his level of play, because of course it hasn't been too convincing so far in year 2, especially with how Joe Flacco has looked. Joe Flacco's like a death sentence for young quarterbacks or for anybody standing in front of him. It always ends up just having Joe Flacco start. So if Joe Flacco doesn't stay with the Colts and he goes somewhere else, that starting quarterback's got to either get out of there or play flawless enough to not have Joe Flacco be an option, because he is going to play. If there's any hint of, could we get better, Joe Flacco's going to play, and he's done it with the Colts, the Colts this year, but the Browns last year. It always feels like he can't go away. He can't stop starting. But in all seriousness, I think there's a little bit of two aspects here with this situation with Anthony Richardson, and now knowing that he did get benched. Is this situation something to, really take a lot of stock in? I would say yes, because of the fact that we're going to get very, macro here and say that Anthony Richardson is one of 32 starting quarterbacks, right, in the NFL. For you to not realize how important that is, for you not to realize how significant the quarterback position is in that moment, and being in a close game against a division rival, to just be unaware of, how good you essentially have it, right, to be in this position, for you not to be there in a crucial moment for your team. It looks bad to everybody else on the outside, right? But I can't imagine what the tensions are, what the feelings are in that locker room. And you kind of get a hint of it when the center, Ryan Kelly, I saw that he said afterwards that what Anthony Richardson did, that's not the standard. And Ryan Kelly, as much of a football guy as anybody, right? You'll never catch him taking a play off, right? As an offense really is, with his running ability. I can't imagine what his teammates are thinking, what kind of message that it sends out to his teammates, to the coaches, to the fan base also. And that's where I think this decision to move on, well, not move on, just to go to Joe Flacco here, to start now, and kind of how it impacts this moment here by Anthony Richardson, is that I'd say that it factors into this in a combination where you have Anthony Richardson here already in his second year, and you're asking for the fan base to be patient with the young guy. You know, he's the future. He's going to get it. He needs these experiences, right? But also knowing how fans are, being so impatient, wanting results. He's at 44% so far this year. He's averaging 159 yards per game passing, which is 34th in the NFL. And again, there's 32 starting quarterbacks. So for him to be 34th is backup level, honestly, right now. And he's tied for third with 7 interceptions, and he only has 4 touchdowns throwing the ball. So you understand as a fan, right? And I think they're the ones that I think this matters to the most, rightly so. Because you're looking at this quarterback where you want to give him time, right? You hear that you need to be patient with him. He's going to play better. He's not looking great right now, but he's the future. He's the guy going forward. So you're already kind of teetering on the balance of, get this guy out of here because he's not playing well, or buying time, buying into him. He's going to be the future, right? And then when you see a moment like this, where you see him kind of send a bad message, send a bad look to the fan bases, the teammates, and everything like that, and you see him just say, you know what, I'm tired. I'm just going to take a break, guys. Like 3rd and goal, it's all right for me to step away, right? You relate it to other jobs, right? Where, not directly to other jobs, but just in the sense that you have such a big moment, a critical point in your profession, right? Would the boss or the leader of that organization, or yourself in a position in your job, when you know you have a critical deadline or a critical event or a critical day for your business or your job that you work at, would you go up to your boss, or would you go up to everybody that is putting in a lot of work to make this event or day, whatever the case may be, the best it could be?Uld you say, from a leadership standpoint, be like, you know what, I'm going to take a break here. I'm not going to be able to make it for this important date. I'm feeling a little bit tired, right? You wouldn't say that. And if you did, and on top of that, you're not performing well at your job, you look at the fans now and you're thinking, we're the ones being told to be patient with this guy. We're going to be patient with him. We're going to be all right with him throwing more interceptions than touchdowns, not being particularly accurate, not really throwing for a lot of yards each game. We're going to swallow that pill and just watch the growing pains, right? And then you see the quarterback himself be like, you know what, I'm tired. I'm going to take a break. And as a fan, you're thinking like you can't be serious, right? Like, is this a joke? I'm being told that I need to be patient with this starting quarterback that isn't going to put the emphasis or the importance on this one play on 3rd down against the Texans. It's almost like a spit in the face to everyone that's been harping, everyone that has been told that we need patience with this guy, and they're going to be like, all right. But then the quarterback goes out and you see something like this. It's almost like the last straw. And a lot of fans, I'm sure we've seen people talk about it in the media. Colts fans are feeling pretty upset by that. Did it cost them the game? No, they had other chances to win. But I think the message overall on what that says about the quarterback, you don't want to send that kind of message about the organization, right, to the players, that it's all right to just tap yourself out when you're feeling a little bit tired. It's a culture thing, and for your leader to kind of do that is not a good look. And I think that, in combination with what Anthony Richardson has shown on the field, has gone into this decision of him now being benched ultimately. And we're going to talk about him being benched a little bit more tomorrow, but for right now, we had to address that topic because it did gain a lot of attention over the last day or so. But, that was the last segment. That'll do it for us today on the Chip Shot Football Podcast. I'd like to thank you guys for joining me as always. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. And if you want to see more of the Chip Shot Football Podcast, go check out both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the Sports Network channel, to see a lot more coverage around the NFL in a variety of different ways. And also, if you want to see more of the live shows specifically, they're on each and every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on both of the YouTube channels. So make sure to go check that out. Join me again tomorrow at 6:30 as always to talk more NFL. We're going to talk about the Anthony Richardson thing and Stephon Diggs also being out with an ACL. It's going to be a full day tomorrow, so make sure to join me on tomorrow's show. I've been your host, Manny Maradiege, saying goodbye for now, and I'll see you guys all back here again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.